Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into someone pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Omar ibn Al-Khattab, second caliph of Islam.
Right.
We're going to be looking at his virtues,
Okay.
specifically 10 virtues that Dr. Omar Suleiman talks about in a lecture he did for the Yaqeen Institute.
Cool.
And we're going to see what we can learn from his life,
Sounds good.
even though it's so long ago.
Yeah. I mean, his story, it's really interesting. It still resonates with people today. Like, we think about leadership and we often think about power and authority. But Omar, he kind of challenges that, you know? Like,
Right.
he shows us another way.
Yeah, let's unpack that a bit.
Okay?
Let's start with virtue number 1,
Yeah.
divinely inspired to truth. So this doesn't mean that he had like a direct line to revelation,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly. It's more nuanced than that.
It's about this idea of fitra.
Yeah. So, can you explain fitra a bit more?
Yeah.
So fitra is like this innate goodness. It's like we're all born with it. It's
Mm.
like a moral compass that points us towards the truth. It's this idea that we just naturally know what's right and wrong, even before we're taught anything.
I see.
It's like a seed of truth is already planted inside us, just waiting to be nurtured.
So like we all have this potential for good,
Exactly.
but how did that connect to Omar specifically?
So what's interesting about Omar is that even before he became Muslim, his actions kind of showed this strong sense of fitra.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like he was known to oppose things that just felt wrong to him, like
Yeah.
burying daughters alive, which was a common practice back then. And he was really against it.
Wow.
He also spoke out against economic injustices he saw. Like he was just naturally drawn to fairness and compassion.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it was like his internal compass. It was
Yeah.
already really tuned in.
Even before Islam.
Yeah, even before Islam. And this is emphasized even more by one of his du'as, like his prayers to Allah. He'd ask to be shown truth as truth and falsehood as falsehood, which shows
Wow.
how much he wanted to be aligned with what was right.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It is.
It's not just about accepting what we're told.
Right. It's about actually seeking out the truth for yourself
Mm.
and making sure your intentions are aligned with what you believe.
Right.
So it makes you think, are we really seeking truth the way Omar did?
Yeah.
Do we have the courage to question our beliefs?
That is something to think about.
It is.
Okay, so the next virtue, this is where things get interesting.
Okay.
The Quran agreed with Omar.
Yeah, this one's interesting. But it's important to clarify, we're not saying he like dictated the Quran.
Right.
It's more that his opinions often ended up aligning with what was later revealed in the Quran.
It's like he had this intuition.
Yeah, like he was really tuned into what was coming.
Hmm.
So there are some great examples.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Suleiman mentions that Omar was really vocal about prohibiting alcohol, even though he actually enjoyed drinking wine himself.
I remember that.
And then later on, the Quran revealed verses prohibiting alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah, and he also had this idea about how to deal with the captives from the Battle of Badr. And later on, the Quran actually revealed verses that aligned with his idea.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And he suggested that the Station of Ibrahim should be a place of prayer. And that became an established practice. And then I think the
And
most interesting one, he actually questioned the prophet praying for a leader who was known to be a hypocrite.
right,
And that led to a revelation saying that you shouldn't pray for hypocrites.
exactly.
Wow.
It's like mind-blowing. It really makes you wonder,
does.
like, what was the connection between his insight and what God was revealing?
Right.
It makes you think that maybe when our hearts are sincere and our intentions are pure,
Yeah.
that we can tap into a deeper truth.
Okay, so virtue number 3, this is a bit more mystical.
Oh, really?
Virtues revealed in dreams.
Okay.
So Dr. Suleiman mentions that the Prophet Muhammad, he actually had a bunch of dreams about Omar. And these dreams, they often highlighted his character and his virtues. So why were they considered so important?
Well, in Islam, prophetic dreams, they're really significant. It's like they give us a glimpse into the unseen world, revealing deeper truths about people and events. So the fact that the prophet had so many dreams about Omar, and many of them showing his positive qualities, it shows how special he was and the important role he would play.
So these weren't just random dreams.
No, they were seen as divinely inspired.
Okay.
And each dream kind of showed something unique about Omar's character. Like, for example, in one dream, the prophet saw Omar wearing this super long garment, which symbolized his commitment to Islam and how dedicated he was to upholding its principles.
And then there's the milk dream, which I always find fascinating.
Yeah, the milk dream. So in this dream, the prophet saw himself drinking milk that was flowing from his fingers, and then he saw Omar drinking from that same stream of milk.
Right.
So it was like this powerful symbol of knowledge and wisdom being transferred.
Like a spiritual mentorship.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's be real, though. The palace dream is the one that gets me.
Which one is that?
It's hilarious, but also really revealing. You know the one where the prophet sees this magnificent palace in paradise, right?
Right.
And at first, he thinks it's for him.
Right.
But then he realizes it's actually for Omar.
Oh, yeah. And then the prophet was worried that Omar might feel jealous, so he quickly walked away.
Right. But Omar's response was so classic Omar.
What did she say?
He said, "May my mother and father be sacrificed for you, O messenger of Allah. Would I be jealous of you?"
Wow. So humble.
Always putting others before himself.
Even in a dream about paradise.
Right. It really highlights his humility.
And it's a good lesson for us.
Yeah.
Real leadership isn't about ego.
Yeah.
It's about serving others.
Okay, so this next one is about how Omar had this reputation for holding people accountable.
Okay.
It's called The Shaitan Flees from Omar.
That sounds intense.
It is a bit intense. It comes from a story about these women who were talking comfortably with the prophet.
Okay.
And then Omar walks in,
Oh.
and they immediately become quiet and hide. They said they feared him more. And the prophet's response to this was super powerful. He said, "I swear by the one in whose hand is my soul, never does Satan see you taking a path, except that he takes another path."
So, like, Omar had this aura about him that just repelled negativity.
It's like that. His constant remembrance of God and how he lived his life,
Yeah.
it created this kind of spiritual shield around him.
Interesting.
Like temptation couldn't touch him.
Makes sense.
But it wasn't just his physical presence,
Right.
his reputation. People knew that he held himself and others to a high standard.
Yeah, no wonder those women were a little nervous.
Right. Omar's example shows us that our actions and our words, even our thoughts, they can affect the environment around us.
That's deep.
Yeah. We can either invite negativity or repel it.
Right. So by aligning our lives with our values,
Yeah.
we can make it harder for those negative influences to get to us.
So it's not about being scary or judgmental.
No, it's about living by those principles that naturally push away negativity.
I like that. Okay, so the next virtue is all about Omar's commitment to his faith.
Okay.
Omar's exemplary worship.
It's okay.
He was known for his dedication to prayer, especially the night prayer, tahajjud.
Yeah, his dedication was legendary. People would hear him reciting the Quran all throughout the night. You know, it showed his unwavering commitment to connecting with God.
It wasn't just going through the motions, though.
No, absolutely not. It was more than that. He had this deep fear of God and this constant desire to be better.
So he really embodied his faith.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's this story where he gets sick after hearing a recitation about the punishment for those who stray from the right path.
Oh, wow.
It shows that he wasn't messing around. He was constantly reflecting and trying to live a life that was worthy of God's mercy.
Yeah.
And it brings up a really important point, you know. Sometimes we see outward displays of piety as like the measure of someone's faith. But Omar's example shows that it's more than just rituals.
Right.
It's about the state of our heart and
Yeah.
how sincere we are. And if we are actually trying to improve ourselves.
So it's not about being loud or showy. It's about that deep personal connection.
That's what really matters.
So Omar was obviously known for his firmness and sticking to his principles.
Okay.
But there's another side to him
You okay?
that maybe doesn't get enough attention.
What's that?
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2. Exploring the balance Omar struck between justice and mercy.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. They might seem at odds,
Right.
but Omar managed to blend them beautifully in his leadership.
I can't wait to hear more.
Awesome. We'll be back soon with part 2 of this deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
See you then.
Bye.
Welcome back. We were talking about Omar's dedication to his faith. It really seemed to drive his actions as a leader.
Yeah, totally. Like his commitment to justice.
Right, it's like what he's known for.
Right, like those famous stories.
Yeah, like when that woman corrected him publicly about the dowry limits.
Oh, yeah.
And he just said, the woman is right and Omar is wrong.
Wow. For a leader to admit that.
I know. Takes guts.
It really shows his humility. Like he wasn't worried about looking bad. He just wanted to do what was right, even if it meant he was wrong. And remember when Salman al-Farsi challenged him about the clothing distribution?
Yeah. Salman felt like it was unequal.
Right.
But Omar listened to him and actually did something about it.
He really cared about fairness.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure everyone was treated equally.
And those are just a couple of stories. Dr. Suleiman mentions a lot of other examples that show just how committed to justice Omar was. What else stands out to you?
Well, there's that story of the horse dispute.
Yeah, what happened?
So Omar was actually judged against.
No way.
And get this, instead of like holding a grudge, he appointed the judge who ruled against him to a position.
Wow. Talk about respecting the law.
Right. Shows that no one is above the law, not even the caliph.
Leading by example.
Totally. Oh, and then there's the time when he made sure that Coptic Christian slave got justice,
Oh, yeah.
even though it was against the governor's son.
I mean, come on. For a leader to side with a slave against someone so powerful, especially back then, that's amazing.
I know. Shows that justice wasn't about your social status or your religion for Omar.
Yeah, it was about what's right.
It makes you think about how we apply justice in our own lives. You know,
Yeah.
do we play favorites? Are we biased?
That's a good point.
Omar's example shows that we should try to be impartial and treat everyone with fairness.
Totally.
Oh, and don't forget, Omar held his own family to the same standards.
Oh, yeah. Didn't he punish his own son publicly?
Yeah, for intoxication and adultery.
That's gotta be tough.
I know, but it shows his integrity.
For sure. He understood that justice means the same rules for everyone, no matter who you are.
Exactly. So it's clear that Omar was really committed to justice, but some people see him as strict or even harsh.
I mean, I can see that.
So how do we reconcile that with all the other good qualities we've talked about?
That's a good question. And Dr. Suleiman actually talks about this. It's easy to focus on the stories of Omar's strictness, but there's another side to him, too.
Really?
Yeah. A quality that maybe we don't think about enough.
Okay, what is it?
Mercy.
Mercy.
Yeah.
Huh. You know,
Yeah.
we often think of justice and mercy as being kind of opposite,
Right. It's like they clash.
but with Omar, they were connected.
Yeah, totally. He was definitely strict about upholding the law, but he also understood that sometimes you need compassion and leniency.
That makes sense. Didn't he pray a lot for Allah to make him more merciful and generous?
He did. And it wasn't just talk, he actually put it into action. Like during that famine when he stopped punishing people for stealing.
Right. Because people were desperate.
Exactly. He understood that. He did. And there's this really powerful quote from him. He said, "For me to relax the punishments by granting doubts to the person is more beloved to me than applying punishment to them while I have doubts about whether or not they are guilty."
Wow. He'd rather be too lenient than punish someone unjustly.
I know, right? It shows a lot about his character.
Yeah, his leadership wasn't just about following the rules.
No, it was about understanding people's situations.
Exactly. So there's this balance of justice and mercy,
For sure.
but there's another virtue that really stands out.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Omar's humility.
Right. We've seen it throughout these stories.
But it's worth talking about more.
Definitely. And it's important to remember that this wasn't fake humility.
Right.
It was genuine. He really understood that God is the one with true power.
He never let his position inflate his ego.
Exactly. And it's like he was always looking for ways to be humbled.
Right. Didn't he say something like, "May Allah have mercy on the one who shows me my faults"?
He did. He wanted people to tell him when he was wrong. He didn't want to be surrounded by yes men.
He valued honesty, even when it was hard to hear.
That's rare.
I know. And there's that story about how he'd physically react when someone reminded him to be mindful of God.
Oh, yeah.
He would actually shrink, like physically,
Wow.
like he felt small compared to God's greatness.
That's a powerful image.
I know, right? It shows his humility and his awareness that he needed God's guidance.
Always.
Oh, and then there's the story of how he stopped giving advice when he felt like people weren't listening anymore.
Really?
He's like, okay, my words aren't helping, I'll step back.
Wow. Imagine a leader doing that today.
Right. It shows that he wasn't attached to power or control.
He just wanted to serve people.
Exactly. So Omar's humility is a really powerful reminder for us.
Yeah, especially in a world that's obsessed with ego and self-promotion.
We should try to be more like Omar.
Totally. Ask for honest feedback.
Be open to being wrong.
And always remember that we don't have all the answers.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about justice, mercy, and humility.
What else is there?
Well, there's another aspect of Omar's character that's kind of surprising,
Oh, yeah.
especially in today's world.
Okay, tell me.
It's his asceticism and contentment.
Okay.
We're talking about a guy who had access to everything as caliph, right?
Wealth, luxury, all of it.
But he chose to live simply.
Wow. That's pretty countercultural these days.
I know. We live in a world that's all about material possessions.
More, more, more.
But Omar shows us that real contentment comes from appreciating what you have.
And using what you have wisely.
Exactly. Dr. Suleiman shares some great stories about this. Like the time Omar saw Jabir ibn Abdullah with that big bag of meat.
Oh, yeah.
And he was concerned about overindulgence.
Not judging the food choices.
Right. Just worried about going
He
overboard.
was always so balanced.
And he lived by these principles. He said, "Do not think that I could not have a fine life. If I wanted to, I could have had the finest cuts of meats, the best liver, the best of food, the best of living. But I chose instead that I want to keep my good deeds to be rewarded later on."
He chose spiritual well-being over material comfort.
I know, it's inspiring.
It really makes you think about our priorities, you know?
Yeah, are we so focused on enjoying this world that we forget about the next?
Big questions.
But what's really remarkable about Omar is his self-accountability.
It wasn't just a virtue for him, it was his whole way of life.
Yeah, it's like he was always checking himself.
Always trying to be better.
Dr. Suleiman mentions this quote from Omar: "Hold yourselves accountable before you are held accountable."
So,
Omar was always reflecting on his actions
yeah,
and his intentions.
never got complacent.
And there's this really humbling story.
What is it?
Omar says that if he heard a voice from heaven saying everyone was going to paradise except one person,
Oh, wow.
he'd be afraid that he was that one person.
After all his accomplishments.
I know. Such
It
self-awareness.
shows how humble he was.
Yeah.
And how much he understood that he wasn't perfect.
Right. But he also said that if he heard everyone was going to hellfire except for one person,
Okay.
he'd hope that he was that one person.
So powerful, balancing fear with hope.
Right. And then there's Uthman ibn Affan. He said, "By Allah, what people don't know about him is even better than what people know about him."
Wow, what a statement.
It's like saying that even all these amazing qualities we see, they're just the tip of the iceberg.
There was so much more to him.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
That real greatness isn't just about what people see.
It's about those hidden acts of goodness.
Yeah. And it reminds us that we don't have to be famous or powerful to make a difference.
Right. Leadership starts with our everyday choices.
Exactly. How we treat others, our integrity, our compassion.
That's what matters.
So as we finish up this deep dive into Omar ibn al-Khattab's life, what stood out to you the most?
There's so much. What about you?
I don't know. It's been amazing learning about all these virtues.
They're really inspiring.
They are. And it makes you think, how can we apply them to our own lives?
Right. Like starting today.
Exactly. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Omar's story is really a testament to the power of character and living a life of service.
Totally. Hopefully we can all learn from his example.
And until next time. Welcome back to our deep dive into Omar ibn al-Khattab's life.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've seen how Omar's virtues weren't just ideas, you know?
Right.
They really showed up in how he lived his life.
His actions, his decisions, everything.
Exactly.
And I think it's so interesting how his virtues actually led to real change in society.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've talked about his commitment to justice and mercy, but how did that actually play out when he was caliph?
Well, that's where his legacy really shines.
Okay.
He wasn't just focused on being a good person himself.
Right.
He wanted to create a whole society that reflected those values.
Justice, fairness, compassion.
All of it.
Yeah, like what did he actually do?
Well, one big example is that he established this whole welfare system.
Yeah, I've heard about that. What did that involve?
So Omar, he understood that for there to be real justice,
Yeah.
everyone's basic needs have to be met.
Okay.
So he set up these stipends for the poor, orphans, widows, to make sure they had food, shelter, health care.
Wow.
He even had a system for taking care of babies who were abandoned.
It's amazing how ahead of his time he was.
It really is. Like, those ideas were revolutionary back then.
Yeah.
And he also started all these public works projects to create jobs and build infrastructure that would benefit everyone.
Like what kinds of projects?
Canals, roads, bridges, things that helped with trade and just made life better for people.
That makes sense.
And remember how focused he was on education?
Yeah. He built schools and libraries all over the empire.
He wanted everyone to have access to knowledge.
It didn't matter who you were or where you came from.
Exactly.
So it sounds like he had this vision for a really just an equitable society.
He did. And he also cared about fairness for people outside of the Muslim community.
Really?
Yeah, he set clear rules for how non-Muslims should be treated to guarantee their religious freedom and make sure they were protected by the law.
Wow.
I mean, his approach was totally groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And it set an example for tolerance and coexistence that we can still learn from today.
It's clear that Omar's leadership wasn't just about being a good Muslim.
Right. It was about making the world a better place.
For everyone.
For everyone.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to go back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
You said there's even more to Omar that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Uthman ibn Affan said, by Allah, what people don't know about him is even better than what people know about him.
Well, that's a pretty powerful statement.
It is. What do you think he meant by that?
It's hard to know for sure,
Yeah.
but I think it points to how sincere Omar was. Like, all the acts of kindness and generosity that he did quietly, that no one really saw.
Right. The private prayers.
The charity he gave in secret,
Yeah. The little things that show someone's true character.
those are the things that really matter.
It makes you think that real greatness isn't about fame or recognition.
It's about those hidden acts of goodness.
And it reminds us that we don't have to be in charge or have our names in history books to make a difference.
Exactly.
Real leadership is about the choices we make every day.
How we treat people, our integrity, our compassion,
It's the small things that add up.
and have a big impact.
So as we finish this deep dive into Omar ibn al-Khattab's life, what's your biggest takeaway?
His story really highlights the power of character and living a life of service.
It's inspiring.
It is. Hopefully we can all learn something from his example.
I agree. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.